John Lennon was brought to the emergency room at the Roosevelt site, St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, this evening, shortly before 11 p.m. He was dead on arrival.
On the 8th of December 1980, a security guard had to dial M for murder. The beloved musician was intentionally gunned down as he was returning home. Though the doctors frantically worked to undo the damage the 4 explosive bullets had caused, there was nothing that could be done. Before his death, John Lennon was considered one of the world's greatest singer-songwriters. His contributions through both the band The Beatles and his solo career are legendary and remain unmatched. Unfortunately, the night he was tragically murdered, the millions of people who had grown up listening to John's music, who had fallen in love with his messages of peace, lost their leader. No religion too. The premature death of this international icon and its circumstances shocked and angered the world. John had spent his last night alive, that fateful night in December, with Yoko Ono recording Yoko's single, Walking on Thin Ice. They then returned to their apartment of 9 years. As he walked towards the archway, a young man yelled out, "Mr. Lennon," maliciously firing his gun 5 times. His serious condition saw the police at the scene decide to take him to Roosevelt Hospital themselves. Dr. Stephen Lynn, who was on duty at Roosevelt, led the efforts to save John's life. Photographs of him announcing the news of the rock legend's death accompanied an article in Rolling Stone magazine. The cause of his death was reported as hypovolemic shock, which was the result of losing over 80% of his blood. The effects of his death rippled through fans all around the world. After the news of John's death was broadcast, fans began gathering out the front of both the hospital and the Dakota apartment, burning candles, laying flowers, and singing his songs. They were all sharing their grief and anger over his death, and more so, its circumstances. The young man responsible for John Lennon's death was Mark David Chapman, who was then 25. For reasons that no one will ever really understand, Chapman murdered John, who had earlier that day signed an autograph for him. With the Charter Arms revolver, Chapman hit John 4 times. All 4 bullets caused serious internal injuries. In the 60s, John had been asked how he expected to die. Believe it or not, his reply was that he'd probably be popped off by some loony. His prediction may have been meant as a joke, but turned out to be sadly accurate. More than 25 years later, fans still remember the legendary singer and peace activist visiting the site where he was murdered. Across the road in Central Park West, there's a section of the park that's dedicated to John and named after one of his most well-known Beatles songs, Strawberry Fields. Fans gather there to take photographs of the Imagine plaque. Imagine is possibly the most famous song John recorded as a solo artist. Fans still miss John, his music and his message of peace, often pausing to remember that fateful evening. Dr. Lynn frequently recalls the night John was brought to his emergency room when he tried in vain to save his life.
I literally took his heart in my hand. I massaged it to try to get his heart going. We transfused blood, we gave him fluid, but we knew that the injuries that we were dealing with were simply beyond control.
John Lennon remains one of the world's most influential singer-songwriters. Before he was tragically murdered, he said he didn't consider himself as a leader, just a man who made music. However, it's clear he was, and still is, so much more.